This bottle of wine is worth more than your entire miserable bloodline, you pathetic creature." Serafina Vandermeer didn't just say it. She decreed it, her voice a weaponized symphony of contempt that sliced through the polite hum of the Sterling Grand Hotel's ballroom. Then, with the practiced grace of a queen executing a peasant, she poured. The liquid, a 2005 Chateau Latour valued at over $5,000 a bottle, didn't splash. It descended in a slow, deliberate, blood-red torrent onto the shoulder of Dr. Alani Williams. It was an act of violation disguised as a spill. The crimson stain blossomed on her simple navy blazer, a sudden, violent flower of humiliation. It crept down her sleeve, a viscous tear of arrogance, and dripped almost silently onto the polished Italian marble floor. Serafina wasn't finished. She pressed the now empty crystal glass against Alani's collarbone. The rim was cold, hard, a circle of glass against skin. She twisted it, a small, vicious gesture, grinding the last drops of wine into the fabric and leaving a perfect circular imprint on Alani's skin. A brand, a mark of ownership. "Oh dear," Serafina cooed, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "How dreadfully clumsy of me." From her table, a chorus of 12 hyenas disguised as Boston's elite erupted in laughter. It wasn't the sound of amusement, it was the sound of endorsement, the gleeful cackle of a tribe confirming its dominance over an outsider. They were sharks who had smelled blood, and they were smiling. Alani Williams stood utterly, unnervingly still. Not a flinch, not a tear. Her face could have been carved from obsidian, a mask of impenetrable calm. Her heart was a war drum beating against her ribs, but her expression betrayed nothing. She was a statue in the heart of a hurricane. She had, in fact, summoned. A single drop of the obscenely expensive wine trickled from her collar, tracing a path down her neck before landing with a soft pat on the black leather portfolio clutched in her left hand. Across the opulent ballroom, a phone camera, held by a guest live-streaming the gala for his thousands of followers, zoomed in, capturing the glistening drop in high definition. Have you ever been so profoundly underestimated that your silence became their biggest mistake? The time was 7:38 p.m. The charity auction, the glittering centerpiece of the Boston social calendar, was a mere 22 minutes from commencing. The grand ballroom of the Sterling was a monument to inherited wealth and unapologetic power. Crystal chandeliers, weighing more than a car, dripped light onto tables draped in white linens so starched they could cut glass. 200 guests, a curated collection of surgeons, senators, and CEOs, mingled in a sea of designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos. The collective net worth in the room could have erased the debt of a small nation. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, fine champagne, and a suffocating sense of self-importance. Alani had entered not through a side door, but through the grand main entrance. She had no entourage, no security detail, just a solitary woman in a well-tailored but unremarkable blazer and slacks, holding a simple black portfolio. She could have been a junior event coordinator, a high-level caterer, perhaps a lawyer waiting for her client. That was the intention. Her anonymity was her armor, her camouflage in this jungle of peacocks. She had been standing near the back of the room, her eyes scanning the glossy pages of the auction catalog, when the catalyst occurred. A minor, almost imperceptible misstep. As she moved past table 3, the epicenter of Serafina Vandermeer's court, her shoulder brushed against the back of Serafina's silk-draped chair. Serafina recoiled, as if she'd been touched by a leper. "Excuse me." Her voice, sharp as a shard of glass, cut through the surrounding conversations like a surgeon's scalpel. 3 tables fell silent. "Do you mind? This gown is archival Dior. Do you have any concept of what that means?" Alani paused, turning her body just enough to acknowledge the woman. Her voice was a low, even murmur, devoid of apology or fear. "My sincerest apologies. It was an accident." She began to move away, to disengage, to continue her mission. "An accident," Serafina scoffed, rising from her seat now, the constellation of diamonds around her throat catching the chandelier light and scattering it like fractured stars. "Of course it was. Let me venture a guess. You're here to serve the canapes, or perhaps to scrub the toilets after we've all gone home." The ambient noise in their immediate vicinity evaporated. The silence spread outwards like a ripple in a pond. Phones, previously hidden, were subtly raised. This was the kind of blood sport this crowd adored, a public execution of status, and they were all citizen journalists, eager to document the kill. Alani's posture didn't change. Her voice remained a placid lake. "I am a guest." Serafina threw her head back and laughed, a loud, performative sound designed for an audience. "A guest? Sweetheart, take a look around you. The minimum donation for a seat at this gala was $100,000. What, pray tell, did you donate? The link to your GoFundMe page?" Her table roared. The men chuckled with polite cruelty. The women gasped with delighted vicarious savagery. Alani simply adjusted the portfolio under her arm, her silence a stark contrast to the braying laughter. And that is when Serafina Vandermeer, grande dame of Boston society, wife of Senator Marcus Vandermeer, made the fatal, irreversible mistake of picking up her wine glass. She held it aloft, a theatrical gesture for the whole room to see, letting the light refract through the deep garnet liquid. "A 2005 Chateau Latour," she announced. "A $400 pour, from a vintage most people only read about." She fixed Alani with a smile that was all teeth and venom. "You know what? I'm feeling benevolent tonight. Allow me to give you a taste of something you could never, ever afford." She closed the distance between them. The discreetly mounted live stream camera broadcasting the event for the Sterling Heritage Foundation's social media currently had 17 to 800 viewers. The young operator behind the lens, sensing a moment, zoomed in tightly, framing the two women in a tableau of imminent violence. Serafina tilted the glass. The wine poured, not in a splash, but in a thick, deliberate ribbon. It struck Alani's shoulder, the sound a soft, wet thud. It soaked through the blazer instantly, the dark stain spreading like a hemorrhage. The rich, complex aroma of oak, black currant, and wasted opulence filled the air. Then came the glass, the cold crystal pressed against her skin, the final, deliberate twist. "Oops," Serafina stage whispered, stepping back with a flawless performance of feigned clumsiness. "How clumsy of me." The room fractured. Table 3 burst into applause. Actual, unironic applause. At table 9, a woman covered her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. Near the east entrance, Officer Dana Mills, a 20-year veteran of the Boston PD working a private security detail, took a single, instinctive step forward before freezing. Her job was to protect the Foundation's high-value guests. But in that moment, she couldn't tell who the real threat was. The live-stream chat became a waterfall of outrage. "Boston Brawler? WTF was that?" "Truth Seeker. That's literal assault. Someone call the cops." "Javi G, screen record this. Now." Vintage Vixen. "Who is that woman in the blazer? Does anyone know her?" Senator Marcus Vandermeer, Serafina's silver-haired 60-something husband, did not intervene. Instead, he raised his own phone, snapped a crystal-clear photo of Alani standing there, wine-soaked and silent, and smirked as he typed a caption and sent it to God knows who. Alani moved. She reached over to table 3, took a pristine white linen napkin, folded it once with unnerving precision, and began to dab at the wine on her collarbone. Her hand was as steady as a surgeon's. There was no tremor of fear, no hint of rage. She was cleaning a spill, that was all. She placed the soiled napkin back on the table, its edges perfectly aligned with the silverware. Then, for the first time, she lifted her eyes and looked directly at Serafina Vandermeer. "Thank you," Alani said, her voice quiet but carrying an impossible weight. "For the introduction." She turned and walked, not towards the exit, but back towards the auction catalog table near the stage. Her sensible heels made no sound on the marble floor. The ballroom held its breath for 3 full seconds before the whispers exploded like 1,000 bursting dams. The time was 7:41 p.m., 19 minutes until the auction. Philip Crane materialized at her side as if summoned from the ether. He was in his mid-40s, his face a roadmap of middle management anxiety, squeezed into a Foundation-branded blazer that was a size too tight across his shoulders. "Ma'am," he began, his hand touching her elbow, a light but firm grip of authority. "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. We've received a complaint." Alani stopped. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his flushed face. "A complaint," she repeated. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact, stripped of all emotion. "Mrs. Vandermeer is a legacy donor, a platinum-tier benefactor," Philip whispered, his eyes darting around nervously. "She's contributed over $3 million to this foundation. I'm certain this was all just a terrible misunderstanding, but—" "A misunderstanding," Alani interrupted, her voice still impossibly level. "If you could please just step outside with me, we can discuss this privately." "I was assaulted," Alani stated, in that same placid, terrifying tone. "In front of nearly 18,000 witnesses." She gestured with her chin towards the live stream camera. Philip Crane's face drained of all color. He looked from Alani to the camera, then back to table 3, where Serafina was now casually reapplying her lipstick, utterly unconcerned, while her husband chuckled at something on his phone. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I'm not upset," Alani corrected him, her voice now like silk draped over a razor's edge. "I'm documenting." Philip faltered. His walkie-talkie crackled to life. A voice, tinny and urgent. "Philip, we need you at the VIP entrance. Governor's arriving." He looked from Alani, the problem, to Serafina, the power. He made the choice that men like him always make. "Security will escort you from the premises. I'm very sorry." He didn't sound sorry at all. Officer Dana Mills approached. Her partner, a younger, eager officer named Kevin Rourke, a step behind her. Dana had a nagging feeling she'd seen this woman before. It wasn't her face, but her bearing. The way she held her ground, calm and centered, like a redwood in a storm. "Ma'am," Dana said, her voice carefully neutral. "We've been asked to escort you out." Alani tilted her head, a gesture of mild curiosity. "On what grounds?" "Trespassing, ma'am, if you're not a ticketed guest." "I am on the guest list," Alani replied. Dana pulled out her department-issued tablet, her brow furrowing as she scrolled through the attendee list. "I don't see your name here. What is it?" "Check table 1, Alani said. Dana's thumb froze. Table 1 was the apex predator of donor tiers. The chairman's circle. 6 seats, a $500,000 minimum donation per chair. She scrolled to the entry for table 1. It listed 6 attendees, all under the same designation. Anonymous donor. She looked up, confused. "Your name isn't listed." "No," Alani agreed. "It isn't." Officer Rourke, puffed with a sense of duty, stepped forward. "Ma'am, with all due respect, if you're not on the list, call Charles Sterling III. Alani's voice cut through his officiousness like a diamond drill. Dana Mills's breath hitched in her throat. Charles Sterling III, chairman of the Sterling Heritage Foundation's board, a Boston Brahmin whose family lineage traced back to the Mayflower, the man whose signature was on every one of her paychecks for this gig. Philip Crane had scurried back, sweating profusely now. "Anonymous donors are pre-cleared by the executive board directly. You can't just drop the chairman's name and expect—" "Then call him," Alani repeated, her gaze unwavering. Philip's hands trembled as he pulled out his iPhone and dialed. The time was 7:43 p.m., 17 minutes to auction. The digital world was on fire. The live stream, now titled by a rogue social media manager as Chaos at the Sterling Gala, had rocketed to 22,000 viewers. A TikTok star at Table 12, a young woman known as Justice Jules with over 1 million followers, had started her own live broadcast. "Y'all, you are not gonna believe this," she whispered into her phone. "I'm at this bougie charity thing, and this rich white lady just poured a whole glass of wine on a black woman. Now they're trying to kick her out. This is disgusting." Her live feed exploded, hitting 70,000 viewers in under 2 minutes. On Reddit, a thread titled Public Freakout, Karen Assaults Black Woman at Boston Charity Auction, had a screen recording of the incident. It had 20,000 upvotes in 5 minutes. Philip's phone connected. He pressed it to his ear, his back to Alani. The transformation was instantaneous and brutal. His face went from flushed pink to a pasty, sickly gray in less than 15 seconds. He listened, nodded, and listened some more. When he turned back around, he seemed to have physically shrunk. His voice was a squeak. "Dr. Williams," he stammered, unable to meet her gaze. My deepest apologies. There appears to have been a gross miscommunication." Alani said nothing. She just waited. Philip swallowed audibly. "Mr. Sterling has confirmed your status. If you'd like to take your seat at Table 1 now." Alani held up a single, elegant hand. Philip stopped talking. She opened the black portfolio. The click of the latch was as loud as a gunshot in the silent ballroom. She withdrew a single sheet of paper and held it up. Not for Philip, but for the room, for the cameras. The live stream operator zoomed in, the shot so tight you could read the letterhead. Williams Global Strategies. Board of Directors Re. Finalization of acquisition of the Langley Historical Archive final payment rendered $22 million USD. The chat exploded into a supernova of speculation and shock. Art Nerd, Boston. Wait, Williams Global Strategies? They own half the damn galleries on Newbury Street. Melissa Chen. Is that Alani Williams, the tech billionaire? Black Wealth Daily. That's Dr. Alani Williams. She's on the cover of Forbes this month. Holy st. Alani lowered the paper. She looked at the pathetic, sweating man in front of her. "I'll stand," she said. The time was 7:46 p.m., 14 minutes until the auction. The whispers started as a ripple at Table 7 and became a tidal wave by the time they reached the bar. Williams Global. That's Alani Williams, the woman who just endowed the entire African American Studies department at Harvard. The one they call the Vulture of Virtue, because she buys up failing companies and makes them ethical and profitable. Alani stood in the exact same spot, the wine stain still a dark, ugly map on her shoulder. The portfolio was closed now, held loosely at her side. Her face remained a beautiful, unreadable mask. At Table 3, Serafina Vandermeer's smug smile had frozen, a rictus of disbelief. She set her empty wine glass down with a clatter that betrayed her sudden panic. "That's utterly absurd," she said, her voice a little too loud. If she were truly that important, she wouldn't be dressed like— She waved a dismissive hand in Alani's direction. Like that. Senator Vandermeer had finally put his phone away. His eyes, cold and calculating, narrowed on Alani. "Philip," he boomed, his politician's voice accustomed to command, "is this woman actually a registered donor, or is this some kind of elaborate stunt?" Philip Crane looked like a man watching his own execution. His phone was still clutched in his hand, pressed to his ear. Charles Sterling III was still on the line, no doubt listening to every word. "Senator, Philip's voice cracked. He took a deep, shaky breath. "Mr. Sterling would like a word with Dr. Williams. Directly." He held the phone out to Alani, a trembling offering. Alani didn't take it. "Put it on speaker." Philip's finger jabbed at the screen. The ballroom fell into a silence so profound you could hear the ice melting in 200 glasses. The voice that emerged from the phone's tiny speaker was quiet, raspy with age, yet radiated a power that needed no volume. It was the voice of old money, of dynastic control. "Dr. Williams," said Charles Sterling III, "I cannot apologize enough for this confusion. Your most generous contribution was processed, of course, under our highest-tier anonymous donor protocol." Serafina leaned forward, her face a mask of fury and confusion. "Charles, what in God's name are you talking about? Who is this woman?" Sterling ignored her completely. "Dr. Williams, if you would just give us a moment to sort this unfortunate matter out." "No," Alani's voice sliced through the air. "I've given you 22 minutes of my time. You've had your moment." She opened her portfolio again. This time she pulled out 3 documents, holding them up one by one for the cameras to capture. The livestream viewer count ticked past 30,000. "Document 1, she announced, her voice resonating with newfound authority. "A certified check for $15 million, dated May 10th of this year, made out to the Sterling Heritage Foundation. Your foundation cashed it 5 months ago." A collective gasp swept through the room. She held up the second document. Document 2, a bill of sale for the complete Langley Historical Archive, signed by the 3 surviving heirs of the Langley estate on April 2nd. The purchase price was $22 million. The archive is, and has been for the last 6 months, my legal property. The auctioneer, a portly man in a crooked bow tie, emerged from backstage, his face pale with confusion. He looked from the document in her hand to Alani. That's impossible. We have the provenance papers, the deed of gift." "Stolen," Alani said, the word landing with the force of a physical blow. "The word you're searching for is stolen." She held up the third and final document. Her voice dropped, becoming the voice of a storyteller, a historian, a prosecutor. "In 2019, Mr. Arthur Langley, a 78-year-old widower, a retired postal worker from Roxbury, was approached by a representative from your foundation. His wife of 50 years had just passed away. He was 3 months behind on his property taxes. This representative offered him a deal to preserve his family's legacy. He was told the collection of photographs, letters, and art, his family's entire history, would be displayed in a museum. He was told he would receive a fair market value." Alani's eyes swept the room, making contact with dozens of stunned faces. Mr. Langley was paid $75,000 for an archive that had been professionally appraised just 1 year prior at $5 million. Your foundation then immediately and quietly sold 3 minor pieces from that collection to private buyers for a total of $2.1 million. Tonight, you planned to auction the centerpiece, the collection's soul, with an opening bid of $18 million. That represents a profit margin, ladies and gentlemen, of over 26,000%. The silence in the room was no longer respectful. It was suffocating, thick with shame and complicity. Arthur Langley passed away in 2022, Alani continued, her voice a quiet storm. His granddaughter discovered the original appraisal documents while cleaning out his home. She contacted my office in September. I launched an investigation. And what my team uncovered was not a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. She reached back into the portfolio and pulled out a spreadsheet, its columns and rows a damning indictment. 15 families, all Black or first-generation immigrant, all approached by your foundation during moments of profound vulnerability. Financial hardship, a recent death, the threat of foreclosure. Your acquisitions team targeted them, offered them pennies on the dollar for their cultural treasures, and then resold those treasures for millions. Over $60 million in profit over 5 years. And the whole time, you reported them as charitable acquisitions and took the associated tax deductions. Serafina Vandermeer shot to her feet, her chair scraping violently against the marble. "This is slander! Charles, are you going to just stand by and let her—" "Sit down, Serafina." Charles Sterling's voice crackled through the phone speaker. It was quiet, but laced with a cold fury. Defeated. "Just sit down." The time was 7:51 p.m., 9 minutes until the auction. Officer Dana Mills hadn't moved an inch. She stood 3 feet from Alani, her tablet clutched in her hand. Her partner Kevin had backed away, his hand hovering near his radio, as if unsure whether to call for backup or run for cover. Dana had worked security at dozens of these high society events. She had seen power in all its forms, political, financial, social. But she had never seen someone command and conquer a room with nothing but paper and the truth. "Dr. Williams," Dana said, her voice low and respectful, "do you wish to press charges for the assault?" Alani turned and looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Dana felt a jolt of recognition, of being seen. "Not yet," Alani said, "but I want it on record. I want video, witnesses, and a timestamp." Dana nodded, pulling out her tablet and tapping the screen to open an incident report. "Victim's name, Dr. Alani Williams. Assailant?" Alani's gaze drifted back to table 3. "Mrs. Serafina Vandermeer," she said clearly, and every single person at that table who applauded. The live stream chat was now a blur of unreadable text. Justice Jules's TikTok live had crested 110,000 viewers. "This woman is a straight-up superhero," she whispered to her phone. "She just accused one of Boston's oldest and most powerful foundations of being a criminal enterprise. With receipts? On camera? This is legendary." Someone posted a link to Alani's Forbes profile. Net worth? $2.3 billion. The comment beneath it went viral. "She can afford better lawyers than the damn Pope." Philip Crane was now just a ghost, hovering near the service entrance, phone still glued to his ear, nodding and sweating and nodding some more. When he finally shuffled back towards Alani, he looked a decade older. "Mr. Sterling is en route," he squeaked. "His ETA is 15 minutes. He is begging you to speak with him privately upon his arrival." "No," Alani said. "Dr. Williams, please." "I have been in this room for 24 minutes, she stated, her voice rising just enough to command the attention of the entire ballroom. "In that time, I have been insulted, assaulted, and very nearly arrested. I do not owe Charles Sterling privacy." She turned, addressing the room of silent, staring faces. "I came here tonight prepared to make a quiet offer. Return the Langley archive to its rightful heirs. Fairly compensate the other 14 families your foundation preyed upon. Radically reform your acquisitions policies. I was even prepared to donate an additional $10 million to facilitate that transition." She let the words hang in the air. "But that was before I was treated like I didn't belong here. Before I was publicly humiliated in front of tens of thousands of people. before your staff attempted to physically remove me for the crime of being a black woman in a space I paid $15 million to occupy." Serafina, emboldened by desperation, stood again. "You can't prove any of this was about race." Alani's voice dropped to a silken whisper that was somehow more menacing than a shout. "You poured a $5,000 bottle of wine on me and announced that it was worth more than my entire bloodline. Would you care to stand up right now and explain to this room, and to the 35,000 people watching online, exactly what you meant by that?" Serafina Vandermeer turned the color of chalk. Senator Vandermeer grabbed his wife's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Serafina," he hissed, "not one more word." The time was 7:54 p.m., 6 minutes until the auction. The grand ballroom doors swung open. Charles Sterling III entered, not with a frantic rush, but with the measured, deliberate pace of a man walking to his own execution. He was 72, with a mane of silver hair, wearing a $20,000 Brioni suit. For 50 years, he had controlled rooms just like this one, with a glance or a murmur. He walked directly to Alani, his face a carefully constructed mask of contrition. "Dr. Williams?" He extended a hand. Alani looked at his hand, then back at his face. She did not take it. "I am here to apologize," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "You are here to contain," Alani corrected him. "There is a difference." Sterling's hand dropped to his side. His eyes, however, were terrified. "What is it you want?" Alani pulled another document from her portfolio. A contract, 5 pages, already printed and collated. "I want you to read this," she said, her voice ringing with clarity. "Out loud, to every person in this room. And then, I want you to sign it, in front of all of these cameras. Right now." She held it out to him. He took it, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly. He read the first page, then the second. By the time he reached the third, his face was ashen. "You can't possibly be serious." "Your auction is scheduled to begin in 6 minutes, Alani said calmly, "and at this moment you have absolutely nothing of value to sell. So you will read it, or I will walk out that door, and my first call will be to the Attorney General of Massachusetts." Sterling looked around the room, at the sea of phone cameras pointed at him, at the live stream feed he knew was broadcasting his humiliation to the world. He looked at Serafina Vandermeer, the woman whose casual cruelty had ignited this inferno. He looked back at Alani Williams, a woman made of silence and steel and spreadsheets. "If I sign this," "If you sign," Alani said, "the Langley family gets justice. 14 other families get their restitution. And your foundation gets a sliver of a chance to survive. If you don't sign, I will not only bury you, I will salt the earth above your grave." She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. "I've already won, Charles. The only question left is whether you lose everything or just your pride." Charles Sterling III closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the fight was gone. He gave a single sharp nod. "Get me a microphone." The time was 7:56 p.m., 4 minutes until the auction. Someone produced a handheld wireless microphone, the kind normally used for champagne toasts and celebratory speeches. In this context, it felt like an instrument of confession, a weapon disguised as courtesy. Charles Sterling held it as if it were radioactive. The ballroom was now packed beyond capacity. Word had spread like wildfire through the hotel. Kitchen staff in stained aprons lingered near the service doors. Valets had abandoned their posts and were crowded in the foyer. A reporter from the Boston Globe had somehow slipped past security and was already recording, her face a mask of predatory glee. Alani stood at Sterling's left, close enough to see the text of the contract, but far enough away to give him the space to hang himself. Sterling cleared his throat. The microphone shrieked with feedback. The sound was adjusted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice surprisingly steady, the result of a lifetime of public speaking. 72 years of performing control. There has been a significant development regarding tonight's main auction item. He looked down at the 5 pages of dense, single-spaced legalese in his hand. The Sterling Heritage Foundation has recently been made aware of certain irregularities in the acquisition history of the Langley Historical Archive. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Serafina Vandermeer sat utterly frozen, her hands flat on the table as if holding herself in her chair. Sterling continued, his voice devoid of emotion, reading the words Alani's lawyers had so carefully crafted. Dr. Alani Williams has provided irrefutable documentation indicating that the collection was purchased under circumstances that did not align with our Foundation's stated ethical standards. "Read the specifics, Charles," Alani said quietly, her voice just for him. His jaw tightened. He turned to the next page. In 2019, the Foundation acquired the Langley Archive for the sum of $75,000 from Mr. Arthur Langley, age 78, during a period of acute financial distress following the death of his spouse. The collection's independently appraised value at the time of acquisition was $5 million. The room erupted. Sterling raised his free hand, a gesture begging for a silence he no longer commanded. Dr. Williams has further provided evidence that this was not an isolated incident. Between 2018 and 2023, the Foundation acquired artwork and cultural artifacts from 14 other families, primarily from Black and immigrant households, during documented periods of financial hardship. The total acquisition cost for these items was $2.3 million. The total resale value and current market value of these items is estimated at over $60 million. Someone from the back of the room shouted, "That's criminal!" Sterling didn't flinch. He just kept reading. The Foundation failed to provide adequate independent appraisals, failed to ensure informed consent, and actively failed to disclose resale intentions at the time of purchase. He paused, took a breath, and looked at Alani. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Therefore, on behalf of the Sterling Heritage Foundation's Board of Directors, I formally acknowledge these profound failures. I offer our deepest, unreserved apology to the Langley family and to the 14 other families affected. And I hereby commit this foundation to the following remedial actions, effective immediately." For the next 6 minutes, Charles Sterling III read his own death warrant. Every word was another nail in the coffin of his Foundation's reputation. A $50 million reparative fund, to be administered by a third-party panel of civil rights attorneys and cultural historians, to compensate all families who were exploited. A new acquisitions ethics board, whose approval would be required for any purchase over $50,000, with a majority of seats reserved for representatives from descendant communities. Mandatory, annual, and rigorous training for all staff, board members, and major donors on implicit bias, racial equity, and the history of cultural exploitation. A public-facing transparency portal where every future acquisition would be logged in real time, including purchase price and any subsequent resale value. A legally protected whistleblower hotline for reporting unethical practices. And the centerpiece. The complete Langley Historical Archive would be immediately and unconditionally donated to the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, in the Langley family's name, with a permanent plaque acknowledging the legacy of Arthur Langley and his late wife, Eleanor. When Sterling finished, the silence was absolute. He lowered the microphone, his hand shaking. He looked at Alani, his eyes pleading. "Is this acceptable?" Alani took the contract from his hand, flipped to the last page, and pointed to the signature line. "Sign it." Sterling pulled a Montblanc pen from his jacket, a pen that likely cost more than the Foundation had originally paid Arthur Langley for his family's soul. He signed. He added the date, the time, and his signature on the witness line. Alani took the contract back. She held it up to the nearest camera. "To all live stream operators," she said, her voice clear and strong, "screenshot this. Timestamp it. This is a legally binding agreement, signed under witness by Charles Sterling III, chairman of the Sterling Heritage Foundation, on October 28, 2025, at 7:58 p.m. The flash of a dozen phone cameras was blinding. Alani folded the contract and slid it back into her portfolio. Then, she pulled out one last item. It was smaller, a single sheet of aged, yellowed paper, covered in the faded, elegant script of a woman's hand. "This," Alani said, her voice softening, losing its hard, prosecutorial edge, "is a letter from Eleanor Langley to her husband, Arthur. It was written in 2018, 1 month before she passed away from cancer." Her voice held, but a new current of emotion ran through it. She knew she was dying. She knew they were in danger of losing their home, and she wrote this letter to beg him not to sell her grandfather's paintings, the centerpiece of the very collection you were about to auction tonight. She wrote, and here Alani's voice was almost a whisper, yet it filled the entire room. "This art is the proof that we were here. It is the proof that we mattered. Don't let them erase us for a little bit of money." Alani lifted her gaze and stared directly, unblinkingly, at Serafina Vander Meer. "Arthur sold it anyway, because your foundation promised him it was the only way he could keep his house. They told him his family's history would be preserved and honored. He died believing that lie." Serafina looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Alani turned back to the room. "This letter will be displayed in a case right next to the paintings at the Smithsonian, so that every person who sees them will understand what they truly cost and who paid the price." She slid the letter back into its protective sleeve in the portfolio. The time was 7:59 p.m., 1 minute until the auction. The auctioneer shuffled forward, his face the color of wet cement. He looked at Sterling. Sterling just shook his head. The auctioneer picked up his gavel, tapped it once on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he mumbled, "due to unforeseen circumstances, tonight's auction has been canceled. The Sterling Heritage Foundation apologizes for any inconvenience. All donations made in advance will be honored and immediately allocated to the newly established reparative fund. We thank you for your understanding." He set the gavel down and walked off the stage. The ballroom exploded. It was a cacophony of shouting, of questions, of camera flashes. Reporters were swarming, pushing past security, shoving microphones towards Sterling, towards Alani, towards anyone who looked like they knew what the hell had just happened. Alani didn't move. Officer Dana Mills was suddenly at her side. "Dr. Williams, do you need an escort out of here?" Alani looked at her. "Are you asking as a security guard or as someone who wants to make sure I get out of here safely?" Dana hesitated for only a second. "Both," she said. For the first time all night, the corner of Alani Williams' mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. "Then yes. Thank you." Dana keyed her radio. "Mills to command. I have a VIP escort, main exit, priority 1. 2 more officers materialized, forming a protective bubble around Alani. As they moved towards the grand doors, their path took them directly past table 3. Serafina Vander Meer was still sitting there, staring at her own hands, which were trembling uncontrollably. Her husband, the senator, was on his phone, his face a furious shade of purple, speaking in a harsh, urgent whisper. Alani stopped. Serafina looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hatred. For 5 long seconds, the two women just stared at each other across the chasm of their actions. Then Alani leaned in close and said, her voice a soft, final verdict. "You didn't pour wine on a poor woman tonight, Serafina. You poured it on the wrong woman. And that is the only reason you will ever be remembered." And then she was gone. Outside, the cool October air felt like a baptism. The streetlights of Boston cast long shadows, making everything seem softer than it was. Dana walked Alani to the curb, where a discreet black sedan was already idling, its driver standing by the door. Not a flashy limo, just a simple, efficient car. Unremarkable. Powerful. "Dr. Williams," Dana said, her voice filled with an awe she couldn't hide. "For what it's worth, that was the single bravest thing I have ever witnessed." Alani turned to her. "It wasn't bravery," she said. "It was preparation. There's a profound difference." She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a simple, elegant business card. "Officer Mills, if you are ever interested in doing real security work, the kind that protects people, not just property and institutions, I want you to call me. I'm launching a new corporate ethics and accountability division. I need people who know how to see what's wrong and have the courage to do something about it." Dana took the card. The heavy stock felt important in her hand. "You're serious?" "I am never anything else," Alani said. She opened the car door, then paused one last time. "And Officer Mills, thank you for not making an assumption. In that room tonight, you were the only one." She got in. The car pulled smoothly into traffic and disappeared. Dana Mills stood on the curb, the business card clutched in her hand, watching the taillights fade. Behind her, through the grand glass doors of the Sterling, the chaos was reaching a fever pitch. But Dr. Alani Williams was already miles away, moving on to the next fight. This battle was over. But for Alani Williams, the war was just beginning. What do you think is the most powerful form of justice? Is it money? Is it public shame? Or is it changing the system so it can never happen again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're finding value in this story, do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories of Black strength and resilience matter. The emergency board meeting was convened for 10 a.m. the following morning. Charles Sterling III had sent the email at 11:47 p.m. the previous night. The subject line was stark: urgent, crisis protocol enactment. Of the 16 board members, 14 were physically present in the 50th floor boardroom overlooking the Boston Harbor. Serafina Vandermeer was not one of them. The view was spectacular, but no one was looking out the windows. Sterling sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He looked as if he had aged 20 years overnight. "Before we begin," he said, his voice a dry rasp, "I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Dr. Alani Williams is not bluffing. Our legal counsel was up all night reviewing the documentation she sent over. It is ironclad. If we fight this, we will lose. The foundation will be dissolved, criminal charges will be filed, and some of us in this room will go to prison." The silence was absolute. Patricia Chen, a 61-year-old former museum director and the board's moral compass, spoke first. "How did this happen, Charles? We have compliance officers, auditors, an entire ethics committee." "We have people," Sterling said flatly, "who told us what we wanted to hear. And we stopped asking the right questions a long, long time ago." Richard Torres, a ruthless hedge fund manager, leaned forward. "What about the Vandermeers? We gave Marcus's re-election campaign $500,000 last year. He owes us." "He owes us nothing," Sterling interrupted. "The live stream peaked at 48,000 viewers. The combined videos of the incident have been viewed over 7 million times as of this morning. The Boston Globe, the New York Times, CNN, they all ran front-page stories. Senator Vandermeer issued a public statement at 6 a.m. this morning, condemning the foundation and returning every last dollar we donated. He had his aide project an image onto the screen at the end of the room. It was the headline of the Times article. Tech billionaire exposes systemic fraud at elite Boston charity. Below it was a photo of Alani, wine-stained and resolute, a silent warrior in a sea of chaos. That, Sterling said, is what we are dealing with. Patricia Chen was reading from her phone. Williams Global Strategies, founded in 2011, assets under management, $10.2 billion. Dr. Alani Williams holds a Ph.D. in art history from Yale and an MBA from Stanford. She has single-handedly funded 12 cultural institutions, endowed 8 professorships at HBCUs, and serves on the boards of the MoMA and the Getty. Her lead counsel is Marissa Okonjo, the former federal prosecutor who won the FIFA corruption case. Patricia looked up at the stunned faces around the table. Gentlemen, this woman doesn't just have a legal team, she has an army. So we just roll over? Richard Torres sputtered. We comply, Sterling commanded. Fully, immediately, and publicly. Compliance is the only path forward that does not end with this foundation in ashes and our names in criminal court dockets. He pulled up another document, a financial breakdown. The reparative fund, $50 million. We have $70 million in liquid assets. It will be painful, but it is survivable. The new ethics board and transparency portal, approximately $2 million per year in operating costs. Also survivable. The mandatory training is a rounding error. He paused, letting the grim reality settle in. But here is what was not in the contract she made me sign. Dr. Williams also filed a formal complaint with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office last night. She is requesting a full forensic audit of every single acquisition we have made since the year 2010. That audit alone will cost us an estimated $4 million. And when they find additional violations, the state can impose fines of up to 10 times the value of the misappropriated assets. Patricia Chen went pale. 10 times $60 million? That's $600 million? Which we do not have, Sterling finished. The foundation would be forced to liquidate, and every single one of us in this room could be held personally liable under the statutes of nonprofit malfeasance. The silence was now laced with pure, unadulterated fear. David Kim, the board's quietest member and a brilliant attorney, finally spoke. What's her endgame? If she destroys us, the reparative fund she just created vanishes. The families get nothing. She gets a precedent, Sterling said, a note of grudging respect in his voice. She gets a landmark case that will fundamentally change nonprofit law across the entire country. She makes an example of us. To her, that's worth more than $60 million. He leaned back, the picture of exhaustion. I spoke with her attorney, Ms. Okonjo, at dawn this morning. Her position is brutally simple. The contract I signed is a settlement offer. If we demonstrate full and immediate compliance, Dr. Williams will request that the AG limit the scope of the audit to only the 15 identified cases. She will publicly acknowledge our cooperation and advocate for reduced penalties. If we do not, he let the words hang in the air, then she will unleash hell. The vote was unanimous. Full compliance. A press release was drafted. Charles Sterling III would remain chairman through the transition and then retire. Serafina Vandermeer's seat on the board was terminated, effective immediately, for conduct unbecoming and violation of the Foundation's non-discrimination policy. Even her staunchest allies voted for her removal. By noon, Senator Vandermeer's campaign had released a second, more groveling statement, announcing that his wife would be taking an indefinite leave from public life to reflect, listen, and seek education on issues of racial equity. It was the political equivalent of exile. The ripple effect was immediate. By the end of the day, 3 other major Boston foundations had announced they were launching voluntary internal audits of their own acquisition histories. By the end of the week, a new hashtag, the Williams Standard, was trending nationwide, becoming shorthand for a new model of transparency, accountability, and descendant consent in the world of cultural acquisitions. Alani Williams sat in her office on the 60th floor of a skyscraper in downtown Boston. The city spread out below her, a tapestry of history and progress, glowing in the late afternoon sun. Her assistant, Kendra, knocked once and entered. "Dr. Williams, Mr. Sterling's office has confirmed. They've voted for full compliance. The wire transfer for the first $50 million to the reparative fund will be completed by end of day." Alani nodded, her expression unreadable. "And the Langley family?" "I spoke with Claudette Langley, Arthur's granddaughter, an hour ago," Kendra said, a rare note of emotion in her voice. "She cried for 10 minutes straight. Then she asked if there was any way she could meet you, just to thank you." "Set it up," Alani said softly. "Private, no press." "Of course," Kendra noted. "Also, Officer Dana Mills called regarding your job offer. She's very interested." "Good. Schedule a meeting for next week." Kendra hesitated at the door. "There are 283 interview requests. CNN, the BBC, the New York Times, NPR, even Oprah." Alani turned her chair to face the window, looking out at the city she was in the process of remaking. "One statement," she said. "Written only. No interviews. Posted on all our official channels. I'll draft it tonight." "Yes, ma'am." Kendra left, closing the door softly behind her. Alani sat alone, the silence of her office a stark contrast to the noise she had unleashed upon the world. She thought of Arthur Langley and of Eleanor's desperate, heartbreaking letter. She thought of 15 families who had been told, implicitly and explicitly, that their history wasn't valuable enough to fight for. She thought of the stinging, humiliating sensation of wine soaking her blazer, the cold press of the glass against her skin, the sound of cruel laughter, and the look on Serafina Vandermeer's face when the world she had built on a foundation of arrogance finally, irrevocably, crumbled. Power, she mused, didn't need to shout. It just needed to wait. And when it finally chose to move, it moved with the devastating, undeniable force of truth. On December 10th, the statement from Dr. Alani L. Williams went live. It wasn't a press conference or a televised interview. It was just words, posted simultaneously on the Williams Global Strategies website and all its social media platforms. On October 28th, I attended a charity auction in Boston. I went with the intention of honoring a family whose legacy had been stolen. I left as a symbol of something I never intended to be. I want to be unequivocally clear about what happened that night. I was humiliated. I was assaulted. I was treated as less than human because of the color of my skin and the assumptions made about my economic worth. This was not a misunderstanding. It was racism. Plain, simple, and documented before a global audience. But what I need you all to understand is that I am not special. I had resources, money, lawyers, time, and an education that most people do not. I was able to fight back in a way that most victims of such aggression never can. That does not make me a hero. It makes me fortunate. And it proves that the system is fundamentally broken. The Sterling Heritage Foundation preyed upon 15 families over the course of 5 years. 15 that we know of. How many hundreds, or even thousands, of others are out there? How many people have signed away their history because they were grieving, desperate, or simply didn't know their rights? How many Arthur Langley stories will never be told? That is why I am not stopping here. Today, I am officially announcing the launch of the National Restitution Initiative, a program under my foundation dedicated to offering free legal services, forensic accounting, and financial support to families who have been exploited in estate sales, cultural acquisitions, or inheritance settlements. If you were pressured, if you were underpaid, if you were lied to, we will help you fight back. This is not charity. This is a market correction. To every single person who watched that video and felt something, anger, recognition, hope, I am asking you now to do more than just feel. I am asking you to act. Share this statement. Share our new website. If you know someone who has been a victim, send them our way. If you work for a museum, a foundation, or a non-profit, demand an audit of your own institution's practices. And if you are someone, anyone, who has been underestimated, dismissed, or erased, remember this. Your dignity is not negotiable. Your history is not for sale. And your silence is not a requirement. Power rarely announces its arrival, but it doesn't hide forever. Thank you. The statement was shared over 100,000 times in the first hour. By the end of the day, the National Restitution Initiative's website had received over 3,000 intake forms from families across the country. The server crashed twice. The first case they took to court involved the family of a deceased Vietnamese immigrant in Houston who had sold his collection of wartime photography to a local cultural center in 2017 for $12,000. The center resold it to a private collector a year later for $700,000. Represented by Marissa Okonjo and a team of lawyers from the initiative, the case was settled in mediation. The family received $500,000 and a public apology. It set a new precedent. One evening, a handwritten letter arrived, forwarded through her attorney's office. The return address was from a discreet P.O. box. It was from Serafina Vander Meer. Alani almost threw it in the trash, but she opened it. "Dr. Williams," the letter began. "I do not expect you to read this, and I certainly do not expect forgiveness. I need to say this for my own soul. I was wrong. Not just wrong, but cruel and monstrous. I looked at you and I saw nothing. I made you into nothing in my mind because it was the only way I could feel like something. That is the ugly, pathetic truth. I have spent the last 4 months in intensive racial equity counseling. I have read history I was never taught. I have listened, for the first time in my life, to people I have spent my entire life ignoring. I am beginning to understand the vast oceanic depth of my own ignorance. It does not undo what I did. It does not erase that video. It does not give you back the dignity you never for a moment lost. I see now that I was the one who lost everything that night. I am writing because I want to be useful. I have begun volunteering for the Restitution Initiative, doing data entry, whatever they will allow. I am using what is left of my name to pressure other foundations to submit to audits. 3 have already agreed. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is something. If you want me to stop, I will. But if you will allow it, I want to spend what is left of my life trying to prove that even someone like me can change. Respectfully, Serafina. Alani read the letter twice. She didn't respond. But she didn't throw it away. 6 months later, Alani stood on a stage in Los Angeles, accepting the NAACP Image Award for Social Justice Impact. In her speech, she didn't talk about herself. She talked about Arthur and Eleanor Langley. She talked about the families whose histories had been returned. And then she looked directly into the camera. Tonight, I accept this award not for myself, but for every person who has ever been made to feel small. For every person who has had their worth questioned and their story dismissed. The world we live in is not yet the world we deserve, but it can be. We get closer to it, not with one grand gesture, but with a million small acts of courage, of speaking up, of refusing to be erased. So if you're watching this right now, I want you to do something for me. Go to the comments section of wherever you're watching this. If you have ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or unheard, I just want you to type 2 words: I'm here. Let the world see our numbers. Let's build a community of resilience, right here, right now. Subscribe to channels like this one that tell our stories. Share this message. Because you are not invisible. You were just underestimated. And their miscalculation will be their downfall, and your greatest strength. Thank you.